Hey Alfred, it's Raul out here. I'm in Hollywood. It's July 8th, 2023. And I'm out here by the Capitol building, Capitol Records building here. I got a nice shot here of it. I could step back, but I don't really want to go across the street. But the reason I'm out here is I just came up with a brainstorm, man. It was just, if Capitol refuses me on this, they're really not thinking wisely. You know, on December 26th of this year, 2023, it'll be the 60th anniversary of the Beatles' first single released on Capitol Records. And it was I Want to Hold Your Hand, backed with I Saw Her Standing There. My mom bought me that single. It was released on December 26, 1963. And that was just shortly a month after President Kennedy's assassination. Because we were still, in a depression about that. It was with our president gone and our beloved president gone. You go in the classroom, Johnson's picture's up there, not that dashing John Kennedy, I mean, what a stunner that was, I still haven't gotten over it, and I never will get over it, and I think you'd say the same, Now, what I thought about was, how about on December 26, 2023, 60 years later, we release all the Beatles singles that were released on Capitol. Now, they could expand it to Swan and to VJ Records, but if they so wish, but they could stick with just the Capitol. But what they would do is put out the original sleeves, which were really unique because in England, when they put their singles out in England, they didn't have picture sleeves like in America. We had some interesting pictures of the Beatles as they progressed. You could see them changing, by 1966. I love that Paperback Writer Rain single, because I just be mesmerized at them. There's some concert footage of them, but what I didn't like is that George and John are printed in inverted. Their pictures are inverted, which means they're backwards. I don't know why they did that. They did that with the Yesterday and Today album, which was a Capitol release. See, Capitol started doing this inverted crap with their pictures. I hate that, because they're backwards. So John Lennon is facing to, if you're looking at the picture, he's facing to his left, or he should be facing to your right. I mean, he should be facing the correct way. And his guitar, he's left-handed. I hate that crap. John Lennon was not left-handed. George Harrison was not left-handed, but they're left-handed. But Paul McCartney's left-handed. He's fine. Ringo's fine. But see, they could re-release that with the proper, because I have a book that has the original pictures the way they were printed on it, and it's a sheet music for Paperback Writer. And it has they look so cool in that, the way it's supposed to be printed, not inverted, but not backwards, but the proper position. But see, what they can do is put a box set out of all the singles with the original sleeves, right? And use some kind of a glossy paper, kind of shiny. But they got to watch on how thick it is, because if we're going to put it in box sets, they put out more singles in America than they did in England. Like here in America, they put out Yesterday as a single, which it wasn't in Britain, in England, Great Britain, So, I think that would be a wonderful tribute to the Beatles, because Capitol has never done that. They've never put out their singles in a box set with the original sleeves, because in England, they didn't use picture sleeves. I think pretty much through the whole career, they didn't use any picture sleeves. They just give you a little paper wrapper. You just get your record out and play it. But here, you could look at some pictures. Really cool. But see, what's interesting about the Beatles is that when VJ started releasing their stuff out here, they weren't popular, man. And it kind of goes to hype, because in February 1963, they released From Me to You, Ask Me Why as a single. That had already been released in England in late '62, right? And it was a hit over there. It was a pretty big hit over there, right? And it went nowhere here, right? And that's a little independent label, VJ, which kind of released a lot of black artists. So then they said, okay. In May, they decided to release, what was it? From Me to You, Thank You Girl, which I like. Thank You Girl. It's a great song, Well, it went nowhere, okay? And this is 1963. President Kennedy's still with us. It's interesting how his assassination, they were in a depression. All of a sudden, these guys showed up. They were already really releasing their stuff out here, but they weren't going there. John Kennedy's in the White House now, right? So then that didn't go anywhere. So then on the third offering, Brian Epstein's trying to get a Capitol to release their stuff, and they wouldn't release it over here. Even though Capitol is a subsidiary of EMI Records in England. I mean, EMI owns this Capitol here, right? And the Capitol refused to put out the Beatles because they said these guys are not going anywhere. Beat groups are out, you had, Fabian, those kind of guys like Frankie Avalon. That stuff was still going on. So they said, the Beatles are gonna go. They listened to them. They weren't impressed. So then, what VJ refused. VJ says, we're not gonna put out another single. These two bombed. So they went to Swan label, which is another independent label in America, and they released "She Loves You, I'll Get You." Now I own that record. I mean, that's up. I mean, "She Loves You" really is a crowning achievement. When you listen to that, man, that energy in that song, man, they just packed in there, right? And it went nowhere. So then they said, okay. So then, would you believe it? Capitol signed them. And they said, you know what? We're going to sign this band. And on December 26, 1963, they released "I Want to Hold Your Hand," backed with "I Saw Her Standing There." I wore out "I Saw Her Standing There" because I thought it was a greater song. Paul McCartney vocal line, Ringo's drumming is incredible, and then George Harrison's guitar solo is impeccable, So, but they put a big hype behind it. The Beatles are coming. The Beatles are coming. So by the time February came along, the single's already out, and it's at number one now, right? It's at number one, and they said, we are not going to America until we have a number one record. I mean, they're pretty. That's pretty ballsy, man, to say that, right? So then they arrived on February 7th at Kennedy Airport. Isn't that something? John Kennedy had been assassinated a few months before. Now they named the airport after. It was LaGuardia Airport, and then they renamed it John F. Kennedy Airport. So then they deplaned, and the rest is history, right? And but it kind of goes to hype. Sometimes I wonder, what if Capitol hadn't signed the Beatles? What if they hadn't put all that hype behind them? The Beatles are coming. The Beatles are coming. Like, I honestly didn't know about the Ed Sullivan Show thing, because 2 days later, after the arrival on February 7th, on February 9th, they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was like millions were watching this. Now, I don't recall seeing that one. I recall seeing the one in 65 and some other footage, but I might have been watching. I can't remember, but I know one thing. I asked my mom, I want that record. Can you please get it for me? I want to hold your hand. So she got it for me, but I said, man, what's this on the B-side? Jesus. Because that was recorded before I Want to Hold Your Hand. They were burning, man, when they did the first album, and they did I Saw Her Standing There. Those sessions are just a mind blower. But here I'm standing here in front of this place called the Avalon. It used to be called the Palace, the Hollywood Palace, see? And I saw a few concerts here, and I finally remember bringing Raymond here, my brother Raymond, and we saw Linton Kwesi Johnson and Dennis Bovell, dub band, back in 1985, and man, we were skanking all the way through. I mean, Linton Kwesi Johnson looks like, I swear to God, he looks like Malcolm X, man. He wears the fedora, the goatee, the look, of Malcolm, but he's singing about issues in Britain, the police oppression, the government, the society in Africa and Britain and Jamaica. He's not really discussing Los Angeles, discussing America. But Ray was saying, hey man, that drummer, man, fuck, that dude's bad. And, because the guy was wearing a fedora and he was skanking, just pounding on those drums, man. Funky, reggae rhythms, But that's one. And then I also remember bringing my late brother-in-law, Eddie Zuniga here. We saw Aswad, who are a reggae band. And he was mind-blown by them, man. Because Eddie couldn't, he suffered night blindness. So he could hear the music, but he couldn't see the band. And I felt bad about that, because he couldn't. But he says, man, that music's fucking great, man. It was like, it was just reverberating off the walls, because it's a little place. And Aswad is in there with a horn section doing Warrior Charge, doing, I believe they played Ways of the Lord. I mean, it was a very religious experience, Alfred. Well, I'll let you go. I don't want to go over 10 minutes, But here, I'm gonna go talk to Amoeba, talk to the managers, and say, do you know anybody at Capitol? Please put this box set out by December 26th of this year. It'll be a big seller, man. You know, have all those sleeves. I mean, those sleeves are so cool. And sadly, the last one that I loved was Lady Madonna, and have the Beatles, you know, peeping at a doorway with, I believe Ringo's on the bottom, George, Paul is on top, John. It's like Paul first, John second, George, and then Ringo. I mean, that is the coolest. That was their last session, man, that they had, that they enjoyed themselves. They're smiling, they're having a ball. And they did, single was Lady Madonna, The Inner Light by George Harrison. And guess what happened? That's when around a few months later, he got involved with Yoko, and he started bringing her to the sessions, and it was never the same again. They never had that harmony and that camaraderie and that joy. It was all gone, man. She destroyed that band. It was really John Lennon blew it. He destroyed it. And I think he wanted to destroy the Beatles after, you know, all its success. He just said, you know, he just blew it, man. You know. So you take care, man. Bye.